Here we go. All right. Thanks, John, for joining me. This is what, third time?
Third time, I think, Drew. It's been a while. We haven't done one in about a year, but yes, it's I think our third or fourth time for sure.
Yeah. It's exciting. I saw you a few weeks ago at NFPA, and that was it was super exciting to obviously see you. Your wife joined you on your little vacation thing too. So it was probably fun seeing the Northeast and getting up to here and to enjoy the summer, right?
It was, being in this industry for 15, 16 years and traveling, to every conference you can think of and customer events and you name it. My wife is, until recently, was not able to make those trips, and now she's able to. And so it was the first NFPA she was at. It was an opportunity for her to see some old friends. We caught up with James Goldenbaugh and Pamela one night for drinks and dinner. And then all the names and people I refer to through conversations with her, she got to meet a lot of them. Obviously, you got an opportunity to see her as well. So it was good. And, there's a lot to do in Boston. Love the city, and we had a great time over the weekend.
Yeah, there was a lot of buzz there. I mean, the Red Sox were in town. Were the Red Sox in town? I don't know. No, they might not have been. I mean, they obviously Red Sox are always halfway decent. Celtics were there. Paul McCartney was there one night. And what else was going on? Oh, the U.S. Open was there last week. So
a lot of buzz.
Yeah. And it's close for me too. It was, and obviously NFPA's, we're I'll do an intro to this, but essentially I want to recap NFPA and just kind of what's going on in the industry. But NFPA being from Boston, it's coming home, having it at the convention center there. So
it was great. I was really, really pleased with the whole week. I thought that the first conference in 2 years for us to get back together was perfect. Great city, weather was perfect. What I was really impressed with was the optimism. Everyone I talked to, from manufacturers to engineering firms to contractors, everyone talked about the strength of the industry, how busy they were, the growth opportunities they saw with regard to new products that were going into new markets and new hazards. It just had a different feel this year. And maybe it's because we haven't been in there for 2 years, but it had a different feel this year than it did prior to COVID and the pandemic, because I think the markets have changed, and it just shows that the industry is growing, and it was really fun to be a part of.
Yeah, it was. We were at the last one in San Antonio. It was three years ago. It was crazy. And I think it was supposed to be in Vegas the next year, and then obviously, it didn't happen. But I've been to, I think it was my fourth or fifth NFPA, maybe fourth, and it was I think everybody was obviously happier to see people, but a lot in the industry's changed. The pandemic's really done a number in both a positive and a negative way on the industry, right? There's been a lot of growth, but there's been, you got the manufacturing and supply issues now, which are, and that's kind of who dominates, at least the trade show. Obviously the conference and the technical meetings and all that, those are always great. And NFPA had to transition. I'm on a newer standard, but even a lot of the older standards, they had to transition to, the different styles of holding meetings. Essentially, they've gone to teams, with everything right now.
Yeah, so. I think it's reflective of how we all changed ways to run our businesses, right? Yeah. And although we really like to be face to face and share stories and catch up, in order to continue the work and how things get done, we're going to have to use Teams and Zoom and all the other programs that have truly blossomed through COVID. In order to keep things moving forward.
Yeah, Zoom went down yesterday in the morning, and I was having a panic attack because I had the whole company's on Zoom, and we have demos that we're showing, and it was literally back up in 20 minutes. But you Google it, and like Twitter's exploding with Zoom, and I mean, there's other platforms you can obviously use, but that's how you meet these days. But I think, and even with NFPA technical committee, they get a lot more engagement. It might not be the engagement, the face to face. That's, I feel like, a little better a lot of times, but you get more people on a lot of those meetings.
Absolutely, right? Because wanting to travel to a tech committee meeting or any other committee meeting takes time, right? I mean, let's say it's a half day in, half day out, so that's a day, and then you're at the meeting for a couple of days. No one's got time for that. And if you can jump on a Zoom call and participate, one, it saves money and saves time and allows more people the opportunity to get engaged, which I think is more important overall. Right. At the end of the day, especially when you look at how the processes kind of flow through the NFPA committees, that's about input.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And you need to make sure that you've got, the industry engaged as you're tackling some of these codes and standards.
Yeah. And you need a good variety of stakeholders in those code processes. I see it in NFPA 915. They've done a great job with getting a bunch of different people on there. Mm-hmm. And I feel like, maybe in the past, and I think it still happens that way, where whoever's got the most money within the industry is kind of dominating some of those code cycles. But I think NFPA has done a lot better job of getting a variety of people, some of the younger generations as well, into there. And, there's a lot of knowledge from the older generations that you can't lose, but you also need to fill the gaps where, people are retiring and rolling off. So you kind of have to have that transition period to kind of keep it going. So
I agree. And I think one thing I've learned, I'm getting more involved in the development of the codes, just given my business and the things I get exposed to, participating, with the FSSA and the committees I'm at there with regard to marketing and maybe the conference forum itself. I'm on the board for NAFED. So I get to see the industry from a number of different angles. And what I truly see happening with the way the codes are developed with the NFPA is, I agree with you. Yes, you've got some of the earlier generation folks still actively involved, and now they're running these committees. But the younger folks, the next generation, are now coming into, one, the process, which I think is very, very important, and two, the codes themselves. Even though the main push of the code won't change, let's use, for example, NFPA 25 and test and inspect. But there are clauses that are now starting to come into the code that start to set the code up for the future. Mm-hmm. 5 years ago, 7 years ago, you and I used to have conversations about how do we change this code and steer it down this path.
Right.
And there were people that were involved in the committee at that time who said, nah, we're going to continue to hold true with what we've always done.
Right.
And right. That next generation is now coming in and really starting to slowly, but, influence where the code's going to be heading over the next few cycles.
Yeah, the code. I think NFPA moves. I think it's a little slow getting them out, every 3 years. But I think the adoption amongst the jurisdictions is probably more there's probably a little bit more of an issue there, because I just ran into it in New York City recently, where I was on the fire code committee, or helped a little bit with the new New York City fire code, and they just adopted the new standard, and it was I think NFPA 25 went to 2014, and I'm like, come on, why wouldn't you go to a 2020 or at least a 2017 version? And there's some pretty big changes from 11 to those later standards, and it's better for the industry. It's better for building owners. It's better for fire protection contractors. Better for manufacturers. So I think it's the adoption with the HJs. I think, and it'd be interesting to see. I've only been involved in that process, but how does it happen at the state level, and why don't they go with a newer version versus stick 10 years behind? And Canada's got a similar problem where I think they're even further behind in like Ontario. So, right. It's interesting how it happens. So
it really is. And I think that, obviously the state fire marshals and the local jurisdictions, control how they're going to adopt and manage those codes in those jurisdictions. I think that the other, influencers, if you will, FM Global, the insurance companies, Zurich, Aon, the underwriters, have a lot more influence. And I think that we see their influence really coming through in some of the newer construction, right? How do we,
Yes.
how are we constructing warehouses, and how are we protecting them with sprinkler, right? How do we, protect, and maybe it's dry goods, but then how do you protect, a frozen warehouse? And,
Right.
not only from a sprinkler perspective and freeze protected sprinkler heads and devices, but now bringing in more air sampling systems, and they're looking at it from a holistic perspective and not just this one single piece of equipment. Right. So, although that municipality might be 10 years behind the code, that new building is built to the newest technology,
yes.
Right? And that will then influence the next building and the next building and the next building. So I think that's a positive. Again, it's not going to change the world overnight.
Yeah.
But it does set the tone for where we're going and moving things forward.
Yeah, I've seen insurance be heavily involved in the design process a lot of times, but and FM's got their on the ITM side. But I feel like they're the only one involved on the ITM side. None of the other insurers, you'd think they would care more about the maintenance of fire protection systems, making sure they're working, versus, I mean, it's really up to the jurisdictions. And I mean, the insurance cares if there's an issue, but like, I don't know. I wish insurers got more involved in the ITM side. So,
yep, I'd support that. Yep.
So what other key takeaways? Obviously everything's doing halfway decent in fire protection. What, any other big takeaways you saw?
No, I made a point to, manufacturers say they're busy, engineering firms are saying they're busy, contractors are saying they're busy, and again, that was where some of that optimism was coming from. That growth, let's look at it from the engineering perspective and the projects that they're working on. And with every engineering firm I talk to, says they just need more engineers.
Yeah.
Right, because they can't keep up with the projects that they're coming across. Doesn't matter if you're a regional guy in the Northeast, or if you're a national guy, or you're a global guy like Jensen Hughes. I mean, it's every engineering firm seems to be one, screaming for talent, and two, and do all they can to stay in front of the projects, which is good because that sets the foundation for the contractor base. And when you talk to the contractors, they're saying they've never been busier. They're taking on as much work as they can. And the two things that are slowing them down are, one, supply chain issues and inability to get their hands on product, and extended lead times from the manufacturers and other suppliers. And I think the biggest challenge that our industry is facing is around labor. Skilled labor. And just made a reference about the engineering community, but break it down to skilled technicians, fire alarm, sprinkler, extinguisher, special hazards, and fire is not any different than the challenges that HVAC is seeing, or plumbing, or pipe fitting. So it just highlights that there is an opportunity for us to find different ways to, one, attract talent to the industry, and two, develop them for careers in fire protection.
Yeah.
You come in as an apprentice. How do you work your way up to field superintendent, into service manager, into design manager, to sales, to general manager, maybe even owning your own business?
Yeah.
I think that there's a great pathway. I mean, you and I have been able to manage good careers in the space, and I think that there's plenty of opportunities for people that are willing to open the door and explore it.
Yeah, it's interesting. The labor's, it was a big piece before the pandemic, and then it kind of just accelerated it. And I know every trade's having issues, but they keep pointing back to, I don't know what the root cause of it is, and maybe we just don't have enough people to do the work in the U.S. I don't know. Everybody says nobody wants to work anymore or whatever, and that could have been it for a good year or so, but like we're a good 2 years plus after this, and I don't know. Maybe we just don't have enough people to do a lot of the direct labor stuff. And
I think I did a blog post last month about the labor issue and what's going on, and some of the research I came across actually took us back to the recession in 2008, 2009. And the construction industry as a whole said that we lost 2.5 million jobs during that recession.
Oh, wow.
And so when we lost those jobs, when we came out of the recession, there weren't people to do the work.
Right.
Right. And we are still lagging that growth
From
today. Right. So generally speaking, there's about 1.5 million jobs still in the construction trades that aren't filled.
Wow. Wow.
Right.
Wow.
They're there.
Yeah.
But there's not there's people that aren't there to take them. So go back 10 years ago when those people would be coming into the trades to be trained, to learn a skill, they're not there. And so now they pursue other fields. And so as they have kids and their families grow, those kids are going to go elsewhere.
Yeah.
Because those influencing factors aren't there anymore. So I do think it's an opportunity for the industry, in our case, fire protection, to really start to understand, how do we go back to a grassroots campaign? How do we find, opportunities to bring more people in and show them how you can manage a career in fire protection?
Yeah. Interesting.
So it's interesting. I think obviously we're together in NAFED in Indianapolis, and you had a chance to meet my son, Nolan, and he's in the process of starting a software company, but focused on the trades.
Right.
And I know you've talked to him and kind of gave him some feedback and some pointers to think through as he does this, and I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But he was a fire extinguisher technician in college, and as he was traveling with his sprinkler coworkers and his alarm coworkers, they're all talking about how do I get to the next level of training? How do I make a couple bucks for the next job, or how do I get a different route if I'm an extinguisher tech? And there were limited resources for those trades to find out where the next opportunity was. How do I get trained and develop and learn so I can manage a career in this space? And so the intent of his website, his company, which is called active-resume.com, is to do that, is to help connect technicians to those resources, to help find, how do they get trained, where the opportunities are at, where's that next job in their market to help them advance their career, et cetera, et cetera.
So is it like kind of like a LinkedIn, or is it Zoom, or is it LinkedIn? Yeah, LinkedIn, or there's a couple other ones as well, but for the trade industry kind of thing. Right?
Yeah, essentially that's what it's doing. I mean, it's connecting people with resources to manage a career, and it's in this context, it's skilled labor. And I see that platform is probably going to expand beyond fire, but that's what he knows, fire.
Yeah.
So he's at it 3 months now, and so far so good.
Well, focus on fire. That's all we need right now.
That's all we need.
I don't hear about anything else. No, I and honestly, I mean, I've tried to do small improvements on the house we bought the year before the pandemic, and I can't get contractors here. It's like either they're 50 years old plus, or they're like apprentices, like they're like new. There's no one in that 30 to 45 year range that's doing. I don't know. There's some, but it's like there's such an opportunity, and maybe they probably went different career paths after. It makes total sense as the recession potentially did that.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? The markers, and I think history just shows you can look at certain markers, certain economic events that happened that changed the trajectory of society and certain things that people pursued. Go back to the 2000 Y2K and all the IT jobs it created.
Yeah.
Right. And then of course we get through it and didn't really turn out to be much, but nonetheless, it put people down the path for IT careers. And obviously look at the size of, technology. And
exactly.
Everything it's doing to influence our lives today. So,
speaking of technology, what were the, I've got a few myself I'll throw out there, but I put a blog or a email blast that everybody saw the other day maybe, but any new technology out there that was interesting? I mean, it's been 3 years since we've had them, and I feel like NFPA, I remember Christina Francis, who's now with Tesla, said this and I think we were on it, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, when we were first at NFPA is go down row 100 and you find some pretty cool new technology. But was there anything else out there that you thought that was pretty nifty?
Nothing really like jumped out and got my attention to like where I was pulling people to the booth to say, you've got to check this out. I think that when you look at the big OEMs, I didn't see anything come out of them specific to something new and specific to fire. Some of them were really pushing their smart building technologies and how to integrate the whole system. I'll leave them nameless right now to protect the innocent. And then I do see obviously a lot of conversation around what's going on with AFFF and PFAS and PFOAs and alternative solutions with regard to other types of agents and how those can be applied. Again, some of that has to be tested yet, and we'll let that kind of work its way through the system. But I did come across, and maybe you can remember the name of the company. I was talking to the guys at Viking, specifically to the detection portfolio, and I was really surprised to see Viking used to obviously a traditional sprinkler house, really good at what they do with regard to sprinkler technology and how they manage water. But I was really impressed with what they've done in the detection space.
Yeah.
How they've built out a really nice detection portfolio. And one of the guys that was in the booth was, I think the company was called Service Tech from Germany.
Okay.
I may have the name of the company wrong. I apologize, but really, and these were tiny, tiny little devices. Smaller than the palm of your hand. And the series of them put together to make, really robust detection solutions. And the concepts were really simple. It was more of a plug and play type environment. And I'm like, wow, this is pretty cool just to keep it that simple, right? So what was interesting to me, and again, I'm not the engineer or the technician. So you have these, really nice stainless steel wrapped, infrared devices and all these big cameras and nice and robust. And then you come to this little device that's no bigger than a postcard or a business card. And you're like, wait a minute, 5 of those in a string, can give me just as strong detection capabilities as that camera.
Interesting.
It was very interesting. Again, I apologize for not knowing all the technical details about it. If they are listeners, I'd encourage them to go to the Viking website and take a look at what they have for detection. But to me, it got my attention. I'm like, okay, that's pushing the envelope.
Mike Crovo, who's I think head of the Viking safety group, and I know he's been doing it for a couple of years now, and it's really is pushing that direction. And a lot of the stuff's coming maybe over from Minimax in Germany as well. But I think there needs to be there's 10 years ago there was some great detection, but the smaller you make it, the easier it is to get out there and install. I think, detections, I feel like suppression is suppression, but detection, there's a lot more runway almost, I feel like.
What did we learn early on with regard to the strength of detection, capturing those fires at the incipient stage?
Yeah.
Right. Yep. And if you can start to create an AI or smart type detection capabilities that can tell you, here's how this piece of equipment is supposed to run, here's the temps, here's the revolutions, here's whatever, right? And it captures that, and that data starts to get a little wonky, and someone starts to operate out of spec, something's going to happen with that device. It's going to run hot, right? It's going to malfunction. It's going to cause a problem. So let's capture that early. Let's capture at the time that off gases, like we talk about with batteries, but let's capture when off gases start to come off, and there's some smoke coming off before you see fire, right? Just kind of, and then make them small enough that they can be applied in a number of different applications, and not necessarily these, big cameras and these big, visual things. That just try to find ways to keep it simple.
And with the lithium-ion battery fire issue, right? I think I don't know this for a fact, and I want to have Christina on here soon, but to talk about what Tesla's doing, they're already probably starting to do that, right? Where if they can detect thermal runaway or any sort of thing happening with a lithium-ion battery, they shut it down. They do it so you don't even have a fire, right? Don't even care about the suppression. If you can get it detected early enough, and I don't know what that is, but yeah, it could be those small detectors, or it could be have something to do with the actual battery itself, right?
Right.
I
Right.
didn't get to talk to her much because she was in row 100, and
Yes,
she
she
was the one
was.
that posted about it, about being in row 100, and yeah, it was really cool to see what Tesla's trying to do, and they're just trying to, it's a big issue out there. That's the probably other than whatever Elon puts on Twitter or the whole Twitter thing. Other than that, it's the fire thing. It's fires with their cars and their battery systems. So
Yeah, it was interesting. Right. So you, on the floor itself, when you work your way back to the expo floor, they had those little training sessions, and I call them little breakout rooms. And
mhm.
the room was normally seated, I'd say 25 or 30 seats. I happened to be back there when Tesla was doing their presentation, and this
Oh,
little 30-seat little, you know, breakout room probably had 250 people around it.
wow, wow,
I was so far in the back I couldn't even hear what the speaker was saying, and I couldn't even read his slides because the font was really, really small. But what was interesting was, and again, this is Tesla out there talking about the smart home, and they were had the demo of the house, and on the house they had solar panel shingles, and then those shingles go into a battery backup energy storage
Powerball.
system,
Yeah,
that's in the garage, and then you're going to use that power wall for off hours power for your appliances in your house and for plugging your car in. But then some of the, technical, quote unquote, I say that in quotes for those who are just listening, the technical experts in our industry saying, well, what happens when you have thermal runaway in your garage? I don't want to lose my house.
right.
Right. And so there's some of the naysayers, but again, I think I commend Tesla for trying to continue to push the envelope with regard to how do you use this technology safely.
Yep,
All right.
yep.
And I think it's only a matter of time before the consumer starts to come around. I mean, where were we 15 years ago before we conceptually talked about electric vehicles? And yet now it's probably 1 out of every 7 or 8 cars, depending on what part of the country you live in.
Yeah,
People drive them all over the place. So
I'm looking to do because I have good sun on my roof, and I thought a few years ago I looked into the Tesla roof, and it's actually not that much money
mhm.
to put a power wall in. Yeah, that's a little bit more, but I don't need a generator now because I'm in
Yeah.
Hurricane Alley in the fall. So I it kind of makes sense. And then I just with gas prices the way they are now, it's like there's going to be more lithium-ion batteries. Which if they can solve some of the, I don't think you're going to be able to suppress one of those fires, but
Nope.
if you can detect it, I think that's seems like it's the way it's going.
Yep. And that goes back to the earlier point you made, right? Shut that battery down the second it comes out of spec,
Yes.
right? And make the battery smart,
Yep.
and then let it roll to another pack, another cell,
Yeah.
um, and put some alert in there to pull that battery pack out so that there is no risk going forward. Um, so interesting stuff. What about? I did not have a chance to get by Potter. Um, did you have a chance to see what they had going on?
I'm pretty in tune to Potter. I talk to those guys quite a bit. I like what they're doing. It's a lot of their fire alarm side is kind of some of the big players at Honeywell back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
And coming over, I I didn't get a chance to go to their booth. I saw Sean and Sean Heskett pretty quick, and I saw Craig Summers on the fire alarm side. And I went to their after hours get together, which was a
Sure.
good time. Not after hours, after show.
Yes. Yes.
I'm not an after hours guy anymore. But um, no, I like what they're doing with fire alarm has traditionally in the last, and it still is going this way. They're trying to make the industry proprietary, which that's not what other that's not what the rest that's not what building owners want. It's not what AHJs want. That's not what maybe some of the contractors want. But I feel like the more open you make, I don't know. I don't know why you're going to lock it down. I know why they're locking it down and making it proprietary, but Potter seems to be going a little bit in the other direction where it's a little bit more open and they're a little bit more configurable and working with others versus if you're not buying this much from me, you're not going to be a distributor. That means you don't get to work on some of this stuff. That's that's my opinion. I don't know what they showed at the show, but I know they're making a huge push in fire alarm. And the service providers I talk to, I'm seeing more and more and more Potter distributors, not even second tier as their distributorship, but first tier,
Mm-hmm.
which is great to hear.
And I agree with you. I think that the strength of our market is having various OEMs that provide technology that we can all benefit from. And what I mean by that is, you look at these large manufacturers that have proprietary equipment that only they can work on. Well, that limits the market essentially.
Yeah.
Right. Because they only have so many technicians and they have so many offices that can go service those accounts. And at the end of the day, it's the customer or the building owner that's impacted by that.
Yep.
Right. So I do see a lot, more value, especially long term, to continue to create a market where you have a pathway for the Potters and similar manufacturers that make equipment that is that can be integrated with a number of different solutions. It's not proprietary, but it serves a great purpose to fill the need with a good, let's use the context of a panel, so a really good panel that can plug into somebody else's equipment and still do the same detection and releasing controls that brand A can do.
Yeah.
Right. It's still robust. Right. Yep. And I think that when you look at the profile of the contractors, and you and I have had this conversation before, so let's draw the market. You might say it's 12,000 contractors. I say it's 10,000 contractors. But when you look at the sheer numbers, right, bigger isn't necessarily better in our space.
Yeah.
There's a lot of richness in those small to mid-sized contractors that need access to those smaller manufacturers. And those smaller manufacturers are the ones that open those doors for all of us to have a dog in the fight with you, if you will, on some of those bigger projects because of the robustness of their technology.